She stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of her penthouse office, overlooking the glittering Manhattan skyline, when the young man walked into her board meeting and changed everything. Victoria Ashford, at 47, had built an empire worth $300 million from nothing. She had survived hostile takeovers, navigated economic crashes, and emerged victorious from battles that would have destroyed lesser entrepreneurs. But nothing in her carefully constructed world had prepared her for the moment she locked eyes with 24-year-old Marcus Chen, the brilliant young architect hired to redesign her flagship hotel. What happened next would scandalize New York's elite social circles, dominate tabloid headlines for months, and force Victoria to choose between the reputation she had spent decades building and a love that society deemed unacceptable. The age gap was just the beginning of their challenges. Marcus came from a working-class immigrant family, had student loans that exceeded most people's mortgages, and possessed an idealistic vision of the world that clashed with Victoria's hardened business pragmatism. Their story became a lightning rod for debates about power dynamics, age differences in relationships, and whether true love could exist between two people from such vastly different worlds. Critics called Victoria a predator. Supporters called her brave. Marcus's family questioned his judgment. Victoria's board of directors threatened mutiny, but beneath all the noise and judgment lay a connection neither of them could deny or explain. It was a bond forged not in boardrooms or five-star restaurants, but in late-night conversations about dreams deferred, in shared vulnerabilities that neither had shown anyone else, and in a mutual recognition of souls that had been searching for something real in a world of carefully maintained facades. This is the story of how Victoria Ashford risked everything she had built, how Marcus Chen stood firm against a world determined to tear them apart, and how their forbidden love ultimately taught them both what it truly means to be wealthy in the ways that matter most. Victoria Ashford's morning routine on September 15th began like any other. She woke at 5:30 in her Tribeca penthouse, completed her meditation and yoga practice, reviewed the Asian markets over espresso, and arrived at Ashford Enterprises headquarters by 7:15. The board meeting, scheduled for 9 o'clock, was meant to be routine, a formality to approve the architectural plans for the renovation of the Ashford Grand, her crown jewel hotel property. She had built her empire through meticulous planning, strategic risk-taking, and an almost supernatural ability to predict market trends. Starting with a single boutique hotel purchased with money scraped together from 3 jobs and a small inheritance from her grandmother, Victoria had transformed that modest property into a luxury brand that now encompassed 12 hotels, 3 restaurant chains, and a real estate portfolio that stretched from coast to coast. Her personal life had been sacrificed along the way. A brief marriage in her 20s had ended in divorce when her then-husband couldn't accept her ambition. A few relationships in her 30s had fizzled when she realized most men either wanted to control her empire or felt threatened by her success. By her 40s, Victoria had resigned herself to the likelihood that her legacy would be her business, not a family. Marcus Chen, meanwhile, had spent the previous night in his cramped studio apartment in Queens, reviewing his presentation for the 10th time. At 24, he had already garnered attention in architectural circles for his innovative designs that blended sustainable technology with classical aesthetics. The Ashford Grand project was his first major commission, a career-defining opportunity that could launch him into the upper echelons of his profession. He came from a family of immigrants who had sacrificed everything for his education. His parents ran a small restaurant in Flushing, working 16-hour days to ensure Marcus and his younger sister could attend good schools. The weight of their expectations sat heavy on his shoulders, but so did his own burning desire to create buildings that would outlast him, structures that would inspire and shelter future generations. Neither Victoria nor Marcus believed in love at first sight. Both were too practical, too focused, too aware of the complexities of human nature to subscribe to such romantic notions. Yet when Marcus walked into that conference room, carrying his portfolio and wearing a suit he had bought specifically for this presentation, something shifted in the universe. Their eyes met across the polished mahogany table, and in that instant, both felt a recognition that defied logic, a sense of coming home to a place they had never been before. The conference room fell silent as Marcus set up his presentation. Victoria noticed his hands first, long fingers moving with practiced confidence despite the slight tremor that betrayed his nervousness. He wore an inexpensive suit that nonetheless fit him perfectly, and when he spoke, his voice carried a warmth and passion that immediately commanded attention. Marcus's vision for the Ashford Grand was revolutionary. He proposed transforming the aging hotel into a green building that would achieve net zero energy consumption while maintaining its historic Art Deco facade. His designs incorporated vertical gardens, solar glass windows, and a rainwater collection system that would serve as both functional infrastructure and artistic installation. Victoria found herself leaning forward, genuinely captivated not just by the designs but by the way Marcus spoke about architecture as if it were poetry. He talked about creating spaces where light and shadow danced together, where form served function without sacrificing beauty, where every element told a story about the building's past while pointing toward a sustainable future. The other board members asked technical questions about costs, timelines, and return on investment. Marcus answered each query with a combination of detailed knowledge and disarming honesty. When the CFO challenged him on budget concerns, Marcus didn't deflect or make empty promises. Instead, he acknowledged the challenges and presented 3 alternative approaches, each with carefully calculated trade-offs. Victoria watched this young man hold his ground with professionals who had decades more experience, and she felt something stir inside her that had nothing to do with business. It was admiration mixed with curiosity, attraction blended with a strange sense of protectiveness. She wanted to know everything about him, to understand what drove someone so young to care so deeply about creating beautiful, meaningful spaces. When Marcus finished his presentation, the room erupted in discussion. Some board members were enthusiastic about his innovative approach. Others worried about the risks of working with such a young, relatively inexperienced architect on such an important project. Victoria remained silent, observing Marcus's reactions as the debate swirled around him. He didn't become defensive when criticized. He didn't gloat when praised. Instead, he listened carefully to each concern, making notes, asking clarifying questions, demonstrating a maturity that belied his years. Victoria made her decision in that moment, though she told herself it was purely professional, based solely on Marcus's evident talent and the strength of his vision. After the board members filed out, Victoria asked Marcus to stay behind. She wanted to discuss some details of the project, she said, though in truth she wasn't entirely sure what she wanted. Marcus gathered his materials slowly, and when they were finally alone in the conference room, the air between them felt charged with possibility. Victoria asked him where he had studied, where he drew his inspiration, what buildings had shaped his understanding of architecture. Marcus answered each question thoughtfully, and soon he was asking her questions in return. How had she built her empire? What was her vision for the future of hospitality? What did she believe made a space truly luxurious? They talked for 2 hours, long past when they should have moved on to other obligations. The conversation flowed naturally from professional topics to personal philosophies, from business strategies to childhood dreams. When Victoria finally glanced at her watch and realized how much time had passed, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: reluctance to return to her regularly scheduled life. Marcus gathered his things, thanked her for the opportunity, and left. Victoria remained in the conference room, staring at the door through which he had departed, wondering what had just happened and why her heart was racing like a teenager's. Over the following weeks, Victoria found reasons to meet with Marcus that went beyond what the project strictly required. She told herself she was simply being thorough, ensuring that her investment was protected and that the Ashford Grand renovation would meet her exacting standards. But late at night, alone in her penthouse, she admitted the truth to herself. She was drawn to him in ways that had nothing to do with architecture. Their meetings gradually shifted from formal office settings to working dinners at quiet restaurants where they could spread out plans and discuss details without interruption. Victoria watched Marcus's face light up when he explained his ideas, observed the way he gestured with his hands when excited, noticed how he always remembered small details from their previous conversations. Marcus, for his part, found himself thinking about Victoria at odd moments throughout his day. He admired her sharp intelligence, her no-nonsense approach to problem-solving, and the glimpses of vulnerability she occasionally revealed beneath her polished exterior. She challenged him intellectually in ways no one else ever had, pushing him to defend his ideas while also encouraging him to think bigger and bolder. The age difference loomed in both their minds, unspoken but present. Victoria worried that any romantic interest would be inappropriate given their professional relationship and the power imbalance it created. Marcus wrestled with his own concerns about what others would think, about whether his attraction to an older woman meant something was wrong with him, about whether Victoria could possibly see him as anything other than a talented young employee. The turning point came during a site visit to the Ashford Grand on a cold October evening. They had stayed late, walking through the empty hotel after the construction crew had left for the day. Marcus pointed out where each element of his design would be implemented, and Victoria found herself watching him more than the building. In the hotel's old ballroom, with only the emergency lights providing illumination, Marcus stopped talking mid-sentence. He turned to Victoria and said something that had clearly been building inside him for weeks. "I need to tell you something, and I understand if it changes everything between us, but I can't keep pretending that these meetings are purely professional for me anymore." Victoria's heart hammered in her chest. She knew what was coming, knew she should stop him, knew that the smart business decision was to maintain clear boundaries. Instead, she found herself saying, "Go on," her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus took a deep breath and continued, "I think about you constantly, not just about the project, but about you. The way you think, the way you see the world, the person you are when you let your guard down. I know this is probably completely inappropriate, and I know I'm younger and I don't have your experience or success, but I've never felt this way about anyone before, and I had to tell you." The silence that followed felt endless. Victoria stood frozen, years of careful self-control warring with emotions she had thought long buried. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "I think about you too, more than I should, more than I've allowed myself to think about anyone in years. But Marcus, the complications here are immense. The age difference alone would be fodder for gossip. Add in the power dynamics of our professional relationship, and we're looking at a potential scandal." Marcus stepped closer, close enough that Victoria could feel the warmth radiating from him. "I know. I've thought about all of that. I've tried to talk myself out of these feelings. But Victoria, some things are worth the risk. Some connections are too rare to ignore. I'm not asking you to decide anything tonight. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, this could be something real." Victoria looked into his eyes and saw sincerity, vulnerability, and hope. Against every ounce of her better judgment, she found herself nodding, acknowledging the truth they both felt. Whatever happened next, there was no going back to pretending they were simply business associates. They agreed to keep their relationship private, at least initially. Victoria insisted on this condition, partly to protect the project from complications, and partly because she needed time to process what was happening. Marcus agreed, though he chafed at the secrecy, believing that hiding their connection implied something shameful about it. Their first real date happened on a Sunday afternoon when both were supposedly working. They met at a small art gallery in Brooklyn, far from the circles where Victoria might be recognized. Walking through the exhibits, discussing the paintings and sculptures, they discovered more common ground. Both had been lonely for most of their lives. Both had sacrificed personal relationships for professional ambitions. Both yearned for a connection that went deeper than surface-level attraction. Victoria learned about Marcus's childhood, how his parents had fled political instability in their home country with nothing but hope and determination. She heard stories about working in his family's restaurant from age 10, about the pressure of being the first in his family to attend college, about the guilt he sometimes felt for choosing a career in art rather than something more practical like medicine or law. Marcus learned about Victoria's struggles, how she had grown up in a working-class neighborhood and been mocked for her ambitions by people who thought she was getting above her station. She told him about her failed marriage, about business betrayals that had nearly destroyed her in the early years, about the loneliness of success when you have no one to share it with. Their connection deepened rapidly, intensified perhaps by the secrecy that surrounded it. They found stolen moments together, meeting at Marcus's modest apartment rather than Victoria's luxurious penthouse. She discovered a strange freedom in his small space, where she could be just Victoria, not Victoria Ashford, the CEO. She cooked simple meals in his tiny kitchen, something she hadn't done in years. They watched old movies on his laptop, curled together on his second-hand couch. Marcus introduced her to his world, taking her to underground architecture exhibitions, to late-night food markets in Chinatown, to poetry readings in cramped coffee shops. Victoria, in turn, showed him aspects of her life beyond the boardroom. They visited museums on weekday mornings when the galleries were nearly empty. She took him sailing on a friend's yacht, teaching him to read the wind and handle the rigging. For 3 months, they maintained their secret, and during that time, both felt happier than they had been in years. But secrets have a way of becoming burdens, and the weight of hiding their relationship began to take its toll. Victoria found herself lying to her assistant about her whereabouts. Marcus made excuses to his family about why he couldn't attend Sunday dinners. The first crack in their careful facade came from an unexpected direction. One of Victoria's oldest friends, Patricia Montgomery, spotted them together at a restaurant in the village. Patricia was discreet enough not to make a scene, but she called Victoria the next day with concern and questions in her voice. Victoria met Patricia for lunch and, after swearing her to secrecy, told her everything. Patricia listened without judgment, but her concerns were practical and pointed. "Victoria, I know you think you've thought this through, but have you really considered what happens when this becomes public? And it will become public. These things always do. Your board will question your judgment. Business partners will wonder if you're having some kind of midlife crisis. And Marcus, that poor young man, will be subjected to scrutiny and speculation about his motives that could damage his career before it's truly begun." Victoria left that lunch feeling unsettled. Patricia's words echoed her own deepest fears, the doubts she had been pushing aside in favor of the intoxicating happiness Marcus brought into her life. That evening, she raised these concerns with Marcus, expecting him to share her worry. Instead, he surprised her with his response. "Victoria, I love you. Yes, I said it and I mean it. I don't care what people think. I don't care about the age difference or the power dynamics or any of the other complications. What I care about is that when I'm with you, I feel like the best version of myself, and I hope you feel the same way with me. If we're going to be together, really be together, we need to stop hiding. We need to face whatever comes head on, together." Victoria wrestled with Marcus's words for days. The logical part of her brain, the part that had built an empire through calculated decisions and risk management, screamed warnings about the potential fallout. But another part, a part she had suppressed for decades, yearned to embrace the vulnerability and authenticity that Marcus represented. The decision was ultimately taken out of her hands. A photographer for a New York gossip blog captured them leaving Marcus's apartment building together early one morning. The photo was ambiguous enough that it could have been innocent, but paired with some digging into Marcus's role on the Ashford Grand project, the blogger put together a sensational story. Millionaire hotel mogul Victoria Ashford's secret romance with young architect, read the headline that appeared online on a Tuesday morning. By noon, it had been picked up by larger outlets. By evening, it was trending on social media. The story had everything the internet loved: wealth, age difference, power dynamics, and enough ambiguity to fuel endless speculation and debate. Victoria's phone exploded with calls from board members, business associates, and media outlets requesting comment. Her assistant fielded dozens of requests for interviews. Her lawyer called to discuss potential legal strategies, though they both knew that trying to suppress the story would only make it bigger. Marcus faced his own storm. His phone rang constantly with calls from former classmates, industry contacts, and reporters looking for details. His parents saw the news online, and his mother called in tears, begging him to explain what was happening and whether this wealthy woman was taking advantage of her son. They met that evening at Victoria's penthouse, their private sanctuary now feeling exposed and vulnerable. Marcus wanted to release a joint statement confirming their relationship and defending it against critics. Victoria worried that would only feed the media frenzy. They argued for the first time, stress and fear bringing out their different approaches to conflict. Marcus accused Victoria of being ashamed of their relationship. of caring more about her reputation than about him. Victoria shot back that he was being naive about the realities of public scrutiny, that his idealism was blind to the real damage this could do to both their careers. The argument escalated until they were both saying things they didn't mean, words chosen to wound rather than to communicate. Finally, exhausted and raw, they fell silent. Victoria walked to her window, looking out at the city lights, fighting back tears she hadn't allowed herself to cry in years. Marcus stood behind her, close but not touching, and said quietly, "I'm sorry, I'm scared, and I'm lashing out. But Victoria, we can't let fear destroy what we have. We can't let other people's judgments poison something that's real and good." Victoria turned to face him, and the dam finally broke. She cried for the first time since her divorce, cried for all the years of loneliness and carefully maintained control, cried for the fear of losing something precious she had only just found. Marcus held her, and in that moment of mutual vulnerability, they made a decision together. They would face this storm not by hiding or apologizing, but by living their truth openly. They would weather whatever criticism came, because the alternative, returning to their separate lonely lives, was unbearable. Victoria called her board chair that night and requested an emergency meeting. Marcus drafted a statement to share with friends and family. They would step into the light together and let the chips fall where they may. The backlash was immediate and vicious. Social media platforms erupted with opinions from strangers who felt entitled to judge their relationship. Twitter threads dissected the power dynamics, questioned Marcus's motives, and speculated about Victoria's judgment. Think pieces appeared in online magazines debating age gaps, gender double standards, and whether their relationship could ever be truly equal given the wealth disparity. Victoria's board meeting was contentious. Several members expressed concern that her personal life had become a distraction that could affect the company's reputation and stock price. The CFO presented data showing a slight dip in bookings at Ashford Properties, which he attributed to the controversy. The head of marketing warned that their carefully cultivated brand image was being undermined. Through it all, Victoria remained calm and professional. She acknowledged their concerns, but refused to apologize for her personal life. She pointed out that the company's fundamentals remained strong, that 1 week of gossip would not undo decades of successful business operations, and that she had always separated her personal and professional responsibilities. She offered to step back from day-to-day operations if the board felt it necessary, but she would not end her relationship to satisfy public opinion. The board ultimately decided to take a wait-and-see approach, gambling that the media storm would blow over as these things usually did. But they made it clear that any further complications or distractions would force them to reconsider her position as CEO. Marcos faced different but equally painful challenges. His parents invited him to dinner and spent the entire evening expressing their disapproval and confusion. His mother couldn't understand why he would choose to be with someone so much older when there were nice young women from their community who would be appropriate matches. His father worried that Marcus was being used or manipulated by someone with vastly more money and power. Marcus tried to explain what Victoria meant to him, how she challenged and inspired him, how their connection transcended the superficial differences that others fixated on. But he could see the hurt and disappointment in their eyes, could feel the weight of cultural expectations and parental dreams being challenged. He left that dinner feeling torn between the life his parents had envisioned for him and the life he was choosing to build. The architecture community proved equally judgmental. Several established architects publicly questioned whether Marcos had earned his commission on merit or through his relationship with Victoria. Online forums speculated about his integrity. A major trade publication ran an article questioning whether his career would be tainted by association with the scandal. Marcos's younger sister was the only family member who reached out with support. She told him she admired his courage to follow his heart despite the costs, and she reminded him that their parents' generation viewed relationships through a different lens shaped by their own cultural experiences, and that given time, they might come to understand. Friends proved equally divided. Some supported the relationship, seeing it as a genuine connection between two adults who happened to defy conventional expectations. Others distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the controversy or skeptical about the relationship's legitimacy. Marcos and Victoria both lost friendships they had thought were solid, learning painful lessons about conditional loyalty. Through it all, they clung to each other, finding strength in their partnership even as the world seemed determined to tear them apart. They established routines that helped them weather the storm: morning walks where they could talk without interruption, quiet dinners at home where they could escape the judgment, late-night conversations where they reassured each other that they had made the right choice. The relationship that had begun as a spark of attraction had been forged into something stronger through the crucible of public scrutiny and opposition. As winter turned to spring, the media attention gradually subsided. Other scandals emerged to capture the public's fickle attention, and Victoria and Marcos's relationship became old news. The breathing room allowed them to focus on building a life together rather than simply defending their right to be together. They moved in together, choosing a new space that belonged to both of them rather than asking Marcos to move into Victoria's penthouse or Victoria to squeeze into Marcos's studio. The apartment they selected in Chelsea was comfortable without being ostentatious, a compromise that reflected their commitment to finding middle ground. The process of combining their lives revealed differences they hadn't fully appreciated during their courtship. Victoria was meticulous and organized while Marcos thrived in creative chaos. She woke early and planned her days in detail. He worked in bursts of inspiration that didn't follow conventional schedules. She approached problems analytically. He relied more on intuition and feeling. These differences led to friction and frustration. Arguments about household responsibilities and lifestyle choices replaced the easy harmony of their early relationship. But they were both committed to making it work, and they learned to communicate more effectively, to compromise without keeping score, to appreciate the ways their differences complemented rather than contradicted each other. The Ashford Grand renovation became a joint passion project. Victoria gave Marcos creative freedom while offering business insights that helped him navigate contractor relationships and budget realities. Marcos brought fresh perspectives to Victoria's established company culture, encouraging more sustainable practices and advocating for design choices that prioritized long-term value over short-term profits. They began attending events together openly, no longer hiding their relationship but also refusing to make it the center of attention. Some doors that had been open to Victoria closed as conservative business associates decided they couldn't be seen supporting such an unconventional relationship. But other doors opened as younger entrepreneurs and progressive thinkers viewed Victoria and Marcos as symbols of authenticity and courage. Marcus's career flourished in unexpected ways. While some establishment architects remained skeptical, a new generation embraced him as a role model for following his vision despite opposition. His work began attracting attention not because of his relationship with Victoria, but because of its innovative merit. He won his first independent major commission, a sustainable housing project that would make his reputation independent of the Ashford connection. Victoria found herself changing in subtle but significant ways. Marcus's influence encouraged her to consider aspects of business beyond profit margins. She implemented new policies at Ashford Enterprises, prioritizing employee well-being and environmental responsibility. She started a mentorship program pairing established business leaders with promising young entrepreneurs from underrepresented backgrounds. They made a point of staying connected to the communities that had shaped them. Marcus brought Victoria to his parents' restaurant regularly, and though the relationship with his family remained strained, gradually his parents began to see that their son was genuinely happy. Victoria introduced Marcus to the non-profit boards she served on, and his fresh perspectives breathed new life into organizations that had grown stale. Their relationship evolved from passionate romance into deep partnership. They learned that love wasn't just about attraction and chemistry, but about choosing each other every day, even when it was difficult. They discovered that the age difference that others obsessed over was largely irrelevant to their actual experience of the relationship. What mattered was mutual respect, shared values, and a commitment to growing together rather than apart. By the time the Ashford Grand reopened to rave reviews, Victoria and Marcus had built something more valuable than either had achieved individually: a genuine partnership based on authenticity, vulnerability, and unwavering support. 2 years after their relationship became public, Victoria and Marcus stood together at the grand reopening of the Ashford Grand. The building had been transformed into a masterpiece of sustainable luxury, exactly as Marcus had envisioned. Critics praised the renovation as groundbreaking, and the hotel immediately became a destination for environmentally conscious travelers who didn't want to sacrifice comfort for principles. The event attracted media coverage, but this time the focus was on the building rather than the relationship between the developer and architect. Victoria and Marcus had become old news, their relationship normalized by time, and their continued presence in each other's lives. They were no longer the scandalous couple, but simply a couple, acknowledged and accepted, if not universally celebrated. During her speech at the reopening, Victoria did something unexpected. She publicly thanked Marcus not just for his architectural vision, but for teaching her that real wealth had nothing to do with money in the bank. She spoke about how their relationship had challenged her assumptions, pushed her out of comfort zones, and ultimately made her a better person and a better business leader. Marcus, in his own remarks, talked about the importance of buildings that would outlast current controversies and trends. He spoke about creating structures that served communities while respecting the environment, and he thanked Victoria for believing in his vision when others doubted, for giving him the opportunity to prove himself, and for teaching him that courage means staying true to yourself even when the world tells you you're wrong. Their speeches resonated beyond the immediate audience. Video clips circulated online, this time generating mostly positive responses from people who admired their grace under pressure and their commitment to their respective crafts. The narrative around their relationship shifted from scandal to success story, from cautionary tale to inspirational example. Marcus's parents attended the reopening, and afterward, his mother pulled Victoria aside for a private conversation. Through tears, she apologized for her initial reaction and told Victoria that she could see how happy her son was, how much he had grown and flourished. She admitted that her concerns had come from love and fear, but that she had been wrong to let those feelings drive her to judgment rather than understanding. Victoria accepted the apology with grace, understanding that parents always want to protect their children and that cultural differences in attitudes toward relationships ran deep. She assured Marcus's mother that she loved her son, that she would never take advantage of him, and that his happiness was as important to her as her own. The relationship with Victoria's board also evolved. Several members who had been most vocal in their concerns privately acknowledged they had been wrong to doubt her judgment. The company's performance had remained strong throughout the controversy, proving that personal and professional lives could coexist without catastrophic consequences. As the celebration wound down and guests departed, Victoria and Marcus stood together in the renovated hotel lobby, admiring how light played through the solar glass windows, how the vertical gardens brought nature into the urban space, how every element worked in harmony. It was a physical manifestation of what they had built together, something beautiful and functional, traditional and innovative, individual and unified. They had weathered the storm, paid the cost that love sometimes demands, and emerged stronger on the other side. Their relationship would continue to evolve, facing new challenges and discoveries, but they had proven to themselves and to skeptics that love didn't follow neat formulas or social conventions. That connection transcended age and wealth and circumstance, and that sometimes the most unlikely partnerships produced the most extraordinary results. Victoria and Marcus's story wasn't about a millionaire woman and a young man shocking society. It was about two people finding each other across divides that others thought insurmountable, and building a life together based on authenticity, respect, and genuine love. Victoria and Marcus's story challenges us to examine our own assumptions about love, age, power, and success. Their relationship forced both of them to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves and about the world they inhabited. Victoria had to accept that control and success in business didn't translate to control in matters of the heart, that vulnerability wasn't weakness but strength, and that real partnership required mutual growth rather than one person adapting to another's established life. Marcus had to learn that idealism needed to be tempered with pragmatism, that standing up for love meant accepting consequences as well as celebrating triumphs, and that proving himself required patience and persistence beyond what youth typically possesses. Their journey reminds us that society's judgments about relationships often reveal more about collective anxieties than about the actual people involved. The obsession with their age difference masked deeper discomfort about women claiming power over their own romantic lives, about wealth inequality, about changing social norms. Critics projected their own fears and prejudices onto two people who were simply trying to build a life together based on genuine connection. The same critics who would have celebrated an older man with a younger woman condemned the reverse scenario, exposing the double standards that still govern how we think about gender, age, and romance. In the end, Victoria and Marcus's story is not really about shock or scandal or forbidden love. It's about authenticity in a world that often demands we perform acceptable versions of ourselves. It's about courage to choose happiness even when that choice comes with costs. It's about recognizing that the most valuable things we build are not empires or buildings, but connections with other human beings who see us fully and love us anyway. Their millionaire woman and young man fell in love, yes. But more importantly, they taught each other how to be brave, how to be vulnerable, and how to measure wealth in the currency that truly matters: love, respect, and genuine partnership.